Going through my Steam list, I'm finding a lot of games I want to play, or more accurately, lots of games I want to play and review, because I have a lot of them that no one really seems to mention. This week happens to be one of those games. Hydrophobia Prophecy, one of those games I think I bought for a few bucks during a Steam sale. In fact, I remember looking at the store page thinking, this game looks intriguing. The graphics look pretty good, as did the description. Sadly, this is one of those games that was overhyped in the description, and I fell for it. Hydrophobia contains a female star by the name of Kate Wilson, who I can't help but think that she resembles Lara Croft, and this occurred from the opening scenes. The catch is that right from the start, I also disliked young Kate Wilson. In her opening banter with an engineer named Scoot, she comes off as extremely whiny. Her personality doesn't change at all as you progress through the game, as every time you find something that goes wrong, Kate complains like a stubborn child about it. But I should start at the beginning. Kate lives on a giant ship named the Queen of the World. This ship acts like a floating city, and there's a celebration going on for what I think is some sort of anniversary. Suddenly, there's a few explosions, and Kate goes from engineer to mercenary as she tries to figure out what's going on and save a few people. Forget that the security forces are being murdered left and right. This engineer knows how to fight. And with that, Scoot tries to walk Kate down the correct path, explaining what's going on and directing her, acting like a guardian angel of sorts. It's a system found in many other games, and this one has the same issue in that you never physically meet Scoot. You'll see a cutscene of his face, sure, but it's about as much interaction as you'll get, other than his voice moving you the right way. In fact, there's not a lot of character interaction in general. You meet a new person, but typically they'll disappear soon after. Meet the chief of security, save him, and then he's gone, never to be heard of again. Meet a corpse, read his backstory, never mentioned for the rest of the game. I enjoy games that give me lore, but at least give me some meat to the lore. Not just a bunch of fluff to give me a reason to go hunting for these boasted 200 collectibles. So the gameplay. It's standard third-person stuff. Kate is more of an adventuring type, not really a shooting person, although about a third into the game you do get a pistol that contains sonic rounds, which happen to be the reason that you're given to have infinite ammo. But before I get to the gunplay, let me explain the platforming, of which there's a considerable amount of. Perhaps I used the wrong term. There is some climbing to be found, trying to mimic games like Tomb Raider or even Uncharted, but most of the time you'll be running around, looking for the next objective or even any collectibles to boost your score. There's no real cliffs, other than some hazardous falls while climbing. But the biggest hazard to you when exploring the Queen is the water, and this makes sense. The ship suffered a few explosions, and there's breaches in its hull, so there's lots of ocean water seeping into the place. Because of this, there will be moments where Kate is forced to swim through rooms and corridors. She's only human, so her lungs can only hold her breath for so long before she passes out. And obviously if that happens while underwater, she'll die. It probably won't happen often, but the risk is there. As for the gunplay, as I mentioned, there's only one weapon you'll find, and it's a pistol with infinite primary ammo. It's pretty weak by default, but its big advantage is that you can hold down the trigger to power up the weapon. This is almost mandatory to do, because the normal piece shots don't do jack for damage. Powered up, you can take out the majority of your foes in one well-placed shot. And if that strengthened blast doesn't do the trick, you can normally fire 1 or 2 weak shots to finish the job. That is, if the other hazards of the world don't do it. See, enemies will take damage from the environment just like you would. Knock an enemy unconscious using a powerful but non-lethal shot, and they may drown under shallow water. You can use explosive barrels to kill or even incapacitate your enemies. And you can't rule out any sort of electrical cables that may be whipping around. The game does tend to highlight any destructible objects on board the Queen. In addition, using the world to maim your enemies gives you score bonuses. Yes, score. The game scores you using a bunch of variables, and this score can be uploaded to a leaderboard. The more skilled shots you make and collectibles you find, the more points you'll earn, if that's your cup of tea. I personally couldn't give a crap, but you might be big into bragging rights. Back to that pistol though. Yeah, it has infinite ammo, but there are a few extra types of ammunition that you can use in it that are much more limited. They might seem useful, but truthfully, the only time I ever used them was during the final boss battle, and that was only because I was forced to use them. You You have to alternate between rounds while a bunch of enemies spawn in to drop more in case you run low. So as much as I'd like to talk about these ammo types, because I didn't need them, I can't successfully talk about them. There is a handy device that you need to utilize at times, the Mavi. It acts to keep you pointed in the right direction, as you can use it to further clarify Scoot's mystic directions. Since this gives you an objective marker, it's instrumental in allowing you to minimize confusing objectives. One of which was that I needed to use the Mavi to find something called a cipher. These ciphers are used to unlock security panels that allow you to progress through the game. They exist almost entirely to further what little plot there is in the game. You'll also encounter thugs that are carrying encryption keys. These keys are used to unlock any doors that have been locked by invading forces, overriding Kate's security access. Anytime you feel like you're stuck, just start searching corpses to see if they have anything interesting on them. Very late in the game, a plot twist occurs that grants Kate some interesting water manipulation techniques. These are very limited though, and are primarily used to solve a few puzzles. It's really a shame, because with the amount of water that you encounter, you would think that this would have been something that you'd encounter much, much sooner. It would have at least made the game feel a bit more interesting. That's the main problem with Hydrophobia. The game just isn't very fun to play. And this is a shame, because you'd think that a game where you get to play on a ship that's been boarded by a bunch of cultists would be fun. But it's not. Those water powers feel way too underutilized. The ammo system is interesting, but again, it's never needed, other than that final boss. And although there is a cover system available, even while swimming underwater, again, I never used it. It doesn't help that the enemy AI isn't too terribly bright. There were a few times where I was playing that it got stuck on objects, or even a point where I was supposed to sneak around a few thugs, but was able to walk right by them without them even noticing me. Even when they are aware of you, they aren't always the most accurate foes, and Kate can take plenty of damage before she's put under. Another problem with the game is that the story just isn't worth following. It just feels way too disjointed to even give a crap about. There's a point where Scoot is taken away, but you never hear anything back about it. So was he killed? Did he escape? What about the ship itself? Does that sink? Does it make it to a port? The main villain, a woman named Mila? What's her story? Why is she commanding a bunch of cultists? Sure, you get a few hints, but it's never anything that's fleshed out enough to care. And what about Kate's water powers? After the final fight, the screen just fades, but that's all you get. And finally, what about the Steam description, where it says that Kate must overcome childhood memories? What? From what I recall, no sorts of horrors from her childhood have ever been brought up at all. In general, the game just doesn't finish up any of the plot lines that you're given, and that kind of stuff is inexcusable for me. I get it if the game gives you an open ending to allow you to think about how things turn up for yourself, but this many holes doesn't make me feel like this is what the developers of the game were going for. Actually, now that I think of it, the whole third chapter just feels tacked on. Kate falls into a radioactive pile of goo or something, although this is never even explained. She then wakes up, and although she has to take a few pills now and then to avoid getting killed from the poisoning, she learns to control her water manipulation abilities. From a few things I've read, apparently this wasn't part of the original release of the game, which was just called Hydrophobia. So I guess we can deduce that yes, Act 3 was just an afterthought to help bring another hour's worth of gameplay to the game. And that's the thing, the game is still extremely short, even for a budget title. It took me probably about 5 or 6 hours, but I can imagine that you can easily finish it within 3 or 4. There's just not a lot of substance within the game. There's only one big thing I can remark on that helps increase the game's score: the graphics. More accurately, the water graphics, and the water physics too. I'm going to assume that the developers put more time into making somewhat realistic water than the rest of the game. Sure, it looks pretty, and everything is muffled when submerged, but what really impressed me is the physics you'll find when opening doors with water on the other side. Upon opening them, you'll see water rush into the area, or vice versa depending on the situation. Kate will also be pushed with the surge, which is actually pretty sweet. You can also use this to sweep the enemies to the ground, which is only required I think once. Still, it's pretty neat to see this in action. Overall, Hydrophobia Prophecy may look good on paper, but it's a game I suggest passing on, even at its current Steam price of $5. Maybe a price tag of $1 would be worth it, but other than that, it's just too shallow of a game to really enjoy. Sure, the water physics are pretty interesting, but if I just wanted the cool looking water, I'd play the first Bioshock. Final score? 5 out of 10. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.